So, some of the very cool research around meditation does demonstrate that when you start a meditation practice, you get better at doing other things in your life. So, you improve your ability to make healthy choices because you become less impulsive. So, if you're somebody who has wanted to make changes in your life around the way that you eat and it just hasn't stuck and you just don't have the motivation, if you're able to actually start a meditation practice, you're more able to withstand your cravings.
Ariel Garten is the founder of Muse, a meditation company integrating neurotechnology into the process. In this episode, she reveals how brain technology is reshaping our ability to focus, reflect, and change. From science-backed meditation to decoding neural signals, we're starting to learn what mental fitness looks like in the age of neurotech.
Muse is an EEG device, so your brain intuitively learns that this is the state to stay in. And as your mind wanders off into thought, you hear the sounds get louder, which is an indication to you that you're now mind wandering, which both allows you to increase your metacognition, your ability to monitor your own mind, and becomes a notification for you to say, hey, I'm mind wandering, let's come on back to my meditation.
Ariel explains how science is beginning to merge with ancient wisdom all over the world.
Currently used by monks and researchers to study this. Yeah, there's a few different groups. So Olav Krieg-Olsen at University of Victoria actually took early muses up into the Himalayas to study the consciousness of monks using Muse devices. And now monks themselves, there's at least one school that I'm aware of that trains monks to be scientists with scientific inquiry. And they are now using Muse in their own experiments to track their own EEG and discover insights.
We're starting to learn how different meditation styles impact our brains differently.
And so non-dual, compassion, focused attention. And it was quite obvious that there is both a difference in the EEG in real time, as well as after the meditation, you could see a difference in the brain characteristics of the ERP.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation. Ariel, it's wonderful to see you.
Thank you. It's an awesome pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk about meditation, neurofeedback, Muse. Maybe to ground the conversation for people that aren't familiar, what is Muse?
So Muse is a clinical grade EEG that tracks your brain, and it can give you real-time feedback on your meditation, real-time feedback to help you fall asleep, and generally helps you track and train your brain's activity. So it's a total brain health tool.
So is neurofeedback paired with meditation? Was that something that existed prior to Muse?
It's a great question. So we first came out with the Muse device. Let's see, I've got Muse devices here. There's one. All right. So this is the second Muse we came out with, Muse 2. This is the latest Muse. We'll talk all about them. We first came out in 2014, and we were definitely the first brain sensing headband to help you meditate that you could easily get commercially or that you could even buy in Best Buy. I launched in Best Buy Canada in 2014. And that was certainly ahead of its time. Prior to that, there were kind of clunky systems that you could use to do neurofeedback during meditation that you could do not in an easy smartphone kind of slick at-home way. So I'd say, our first innovation was making it slick and easy and usable and dry sensor. And there we've, expanded the multiple ways that you can do neurofeedback, train your brain, train your sleep, train all the things with Muse.
That's awesome. Yeah. The story I tell myself is that, a lot of people, at least who've learned about meditation, have heard we studied some ancient monk in some mountaintop, right? When they probably had to sit in this room in a hospital for a couple of days with like all these nodes and contraptions. And you guys made a similar type of experience available to anybody, not just for study, but to actually improve their capacity to meditate.
Totally. And also currently used by monks and researchers to
There we
study this.
go.
Yeah, there's a few different groups. So Olav Krieg Olsen at University of Victoria actually took early muses up into the Himalayas to study the consciousness of monks using muse devices, and now monks themselves. Um, there's at least one school that I'm aware of that trains monks to be scientists with scientific inquiry, and they are now using Muse in their own experiments to track their own EEG and discover insights.
Wow. So cool. The old and
Yeah,
the new coming together. I
I was
love
quite
it.
I was quite shocked when I heard that one. So we have a collaborator at kind of in the Chicago area, who does lucid dreaming research, and he was collaborating with a different group, a guy by the name of Robin, and he works with these Tibetan monks that live basically in exile in India, um, who he's been working on this curriculum with for their training group, and they brought Muse into it. So I was totally shocked. He's like, "Let me present you a paper and some posters crafted by monks in Dharamsala."
Wow. Well, I definitely want to get into that a little bit more, but maybe just to give people just a better idea. So how does Muse actually help me meditate better?
Sure. So for those of you who are watching the video, Muse is an EEG device. So there are two sensors on the forehead and two behind the ears, and it tracks your brain activity and then is able to give you real time audio feedback to let you know what's going on inside your mind. So, in the context of a meditation session, we all know that meditation is good for us, but it's hard to do. It's hard to know exactly when your mind is wandering and to catch each and every wander. And so, Muse gives you real time feedback that lets you know when you're in focused attention on your breath and when your mind is wandering. And it does this by translating your brain activity into guiding sounds. So, as you're focused on your breath, you hear quiet, gentle sounds. If you remain focused, you hear little chirps of birds that become very reinforcing for your brain. So, your brain intuitively learns that this is the state to stay in. And as your mind wanders off into thought, you hear the sounds get louder, which is an indication to you that you're now mind wandering, which both allows you to increase your metacognition, your ability to monitor your own mind, and becomes a notification for you to say, hey, I'm mind wandering. Let's come on back to my meditation. And this actually allows you to not only in real time have a better understanding of your own mental space and catch all your mind wanderings, but also to have a more efficient, quote unquote, meditation session because you're able to more rapidly train your attentional loop.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't tell you how many people who I've introduced meditation to. They're like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. You know, it's like the classic, like, but am I doing it right? I feel like I'm just sitting here, right? And that's one of the challenges with teaching something that's so subjective is that we can't be inside of someone else's head. And so for me, you know, the Muse essentially providing that feedback loop to what does your brain indicate is happening in your consciousness is pretty groundbreaking and pretty amazing, and I think is very supportive for a lot of people that have that type of question whether they're doing something right or whether they're how they can improve.
Totally. So we've heard both from, novices who've never meditated before that this is a very easy on road. It actually teaches you what to do to start your practice. It's kind of like having a little coach or a guru in your head. And then for people with existing practices, it really helps you hone and strengthen it, and do it in a really efficient way.
One thing I've been curious about, you know, I had a woman by the name of Katie Devaney on the show. She was a head of the meditation lab at UCLA, and we were talking about different types of meditations, right? They do different things. It shows up differently in our brain. I believe you guys are pioneering a study with ions. that measures these different, essentially neural signatures of different styles of meditation. Have any of that data come back yet?
Awesome. So what you're talking about is a study that we currently have running with ions. I think was first opened up to 1,000 people. We're now opening it up to maybe 4,000 more people with Muse devices. And there they're looking at 4 or 5 different styles of meditation. So non-dual, compassion, focused attention. And we're asking participants, or they're asking participants, to do the meditation style for a number of weeks to look at the EEG characteristics of that particular style and then be able to compare and contrast. The data has not yet been analyzed. We don't want to be introducing any bias into it yet. So at the end of the data collection, then the data analysis will begin with the folks at IONS led by Dr. Arnaud Delorme.
Oh, nice. Arnaud's been a guest on the show as well.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, so
That's
it's, quite obvious that there are going to be differences there. As we were building Muse, at first we built Muse with a focused attention meditation. So the Muse Mind is a focused attention meditation algorithm. Um, and then as we went on to expand meditation for heart, breath, body, with different sensor types, it's very clear that the physiological signals are quite different. And actually, in one of the studies that Olav did, looking at the monks in the Himalayas using Muse to track their attention, he had them do or requested a focused attention meditation practice, and then looked at a neural signature afterwards called an ERP, event related potential, and then had them do a compassion based practice and looked at the same neural signature. And it was quite obvious that there is both a difference in the EEG in real time, as well as after the meditation, you could see a difference in the brain characteristics of the ERP. So when they did this ERP task, so in an ERP task, you're looking at a stimulus and you have a response to the stimulus. Their response to the individuals participating in this responded more strongly to stimulus after focused attention meditation than during or after a compassion meditation.
Wow. Sounds like you might have been doing focused awareness meditation this morning. So just to understand that, so people were more reactive on the attention afterwards, like in the minutes, hours, whatever afterwards, on the attention oriented meditation than they were on the heart based meditation.
Yep. They performed with greater focus and attention on a attention task.
I see. Okay, cool. It's something that I've it's really obvious to me that different styles lead you to different places. And it was one of the things that I'm curious about, because a lot of the paths or more oriented towards heart than just purely working at the level of consciousness. And I'm just so fascinated about how that shows up in the brain. Like, what do we know about people that consistently practice things oriented towards opening the heart and emotional healing and things like that, versus people that are, non-dual, Advaita Vedanta, different things that are less focused on that. And it sounds like you guys have some indications.
Starting to see the indications. What's interesting about looking at the EEG in these different states is, in many ways, you're trying to find proof for something that is already intuitively obvious to the practitioner. I mean, when you do a heart-focused meditation, when you're doing a Tongwen, when you're sending compassion to the world, you know what that feels like. You know what you feel like afterwards. You know the level of generosity and the sense of abundance and expansiveness that you have. And to then go and say, hey, well, what's the EEG or the EKG signature of that is, just trying to prove something that you are already aware exists. And so, part of the question is like, why do we even care about what the EKG signature looks like or the EEG signature looks like? Because we as practitioners already know that it's different. Clearly there's a difference in physiology and an experiential difference. Are we trying to in the case of science, like, are we trying to identify these so that we can prove it to the world to say that, hey, this is different? Um, and sometimes that is the case. When you're doing uh, focused attention meditation with Muse, for example, there's this super cool study from the Catholic University of Milan, and they looked at focused attention training with Muse versus a standard meditation intervention that they created, basically focused attention without Muse. And they had participants doing it for 1 month. And then they looked at the EEG pre and post of these participants, as well as the EKG, or rather, I think PPG in the study. And they were able to demonstrate that those that had meditated with Muse had persistent changes in their EEG that demonstrated more focus and calm throughout the day. Um, so, super fascinating study, totally, points to the fact that meditation works, points to the fact that meditation with Muse is effective and all these things.
I mean, I think it's an interesting question, right? It's like, if you know it works, then why the hell does science
Why are we
have to
trying to
prove
prove it?
it? And I think the reality is we are in the era where the science is a religion for a lot of people. And for something to be culturally accepted, for something to spread, Andrew Huberman needs to talk about it. And I think like, much love to all those people, but it is just the reality that we're in. And as someone, for me, that was very scientific and has moved much more into a direct experience kind of way of needing evidence to discern truth, like, it's wonderful for me, but it doesn't help my mom get excited about meditation, right? Then when she hears that this scientifically lowers her blah blah blah. And so I think, to me, that's a core function of why this work with science is really important. But it seems to matter less the deeper that someone goes on their journey.
I was getting philosophical for a moment. So, I mean, I'm a scientist. I work with hundreds of research scientists. There have been hundreds and hundreds of papers published with Muse. Um, it was just interesting when I believe very deeply in science and the role that it plays in society, in the decisions that we make in our lives, et cetera. It's just funny sometimes when people ask, well, like, what's the difference versus a compassion meditation versus a focused meditation? And if you are actually a practitioner, your own interceptive observational experience can quite clearly tell you. And then sometimes we're looking for, biomarkers, which are sort of the pale shadows of the indicators of what's going on, as opposed to the inherent truth of how it affects us and affects our interactions in our lives from that moment forward.
Totally. And I think, both are really important, right?
Both
And
are critically important, yes. And sometimes those empirical truths, quote unquote, that we're experiencing are nothing more than chimera themselves, are nothing more than our desire to feel a particular way, and a thing that we've done where we're supposed to feel a particular way, and then we do. And so it was less the activity that made us feel that way than the desire to have gotten to that state in the first place that directed our mind body there. So both the empirical experiences that we have as well as the scientific experiences that we have are both imperfect ways at understanding truth.
I think ultimately that is, for me, from a fundamental perspective, what awareness is really about, which is a deepening our understanding of a portion of truth, which is impossible to know completely. It's the journey, and I think it's the best, personally. So I feel
Sorry,
I
I'm
feel like
I'm
you were going to say something, but we got a little pause with the internet quality here.
yeah. So I'm in a very philosophical moment here. Yes, they're both highly, highly imperfect, but in many ways the best that we have. And as curious individuals who are trying to make our lives better and the lives of other people better, um, kind of all you can do is query and run these experiments of, if I do this, does that get better? If I do this, does life improve for myself, for those around me? Um, and we don't always have perfect mechanisms of querying, and the conscious arts give us a number of pathways that we can use to explore and attempt to deepen our understanding, and attempt to create clarity through the murky experiences that we humans have.
Well said. Now, I know, speaking of better understanding, I know recently Muse launched a functional near infrared spectroscopy. Wow, that is a mouthful. Headset that is kind of a new dimension to beyond simply EEG. And I'm curious what that unlocks for your users and the potential that you see.
Yeah, so it's incredibly cool. So this is our latest device. For those of you who can see the video, this is the Muse S Athena, and it actually really is revolutionary. I've been talking to lots of my science colleagues over the last couple of weeks, and they're crazy excited about the fact that we have both FNIRS, functional near infrared spectroscopy, as well as EEG, as well as SpO2 and PPG, all on the same, low cost, easy to use sensor acquisition device. It's super cool. So for those of you who don't know what FNIRS is, it's kind of like a mini fMRI on your forehead. So fMRI is tracking your bold response, the oxygenation response to in the part of your brain that is working during a task. So when you use a part of your brain in a task, it demands oxygen, and your body responds in kind by flowing more blood and flowing more oxygen to that region. And so you can see the region's oxygen consumption, and therefore its energy production. What FNIRS does is, instead of using magnets, it is using light, near and infrared light, in order to send near and infrared light through the uh, skin and actually through the skull, and is sampling the blood right at the blood-brain barrier. And we have two sensors. So a central emitter, short channels right on either side of the emitter, and then long channels kind of above your eyes, so that we are separately sampling your left and right prefrontal cortex. We're sampling the blood flow to that area and looking at the hemodynamic response. So we're looking at how much oxygen is being sent to your left and right prefrontal cortex, how much oxygen is being consumed through the activity of your prefrontal cortex, and then how much additional oxygen is being demanded. And it's amazingly cool because we're able to now see not only your EEG, which is looking at the electrical activity of your brain, but simultaneously see the blood flow to these two different regions of your brain, your left and right prefrontal cortex, see how they're utilizing oxygen, see how active they are, and see how they change through a range of experiences, which is a entirely novel insight into the brain, to be able to look at these two things simultaneously in real time, and then be able to use that data to track and train and improve your brain.
Wow, sounds like a game changer. I mean, there's nothing really like on the market that's consumer grade that can do this new functionality. Is that correct?
There is one device. So the Mendy device does do prefrontal neurofeedback from independently people who have tested the device. Ours is much higher quality FNIRS. It's really, really research grade data. And ours is the only device that also has the EEG and the FNIRS integrated together. So you get a whole lot more bang for your buck.
One thing that's
A lot
coming up
more
for
bang
me.
for your brain training, I should say.
Nice. One thing that's coming up for me is like, I mean, have we even is there a correlate between those two data sets that it currently exists? I think about someone, okay, we're going to look at a brain in an MRI. Okay, now we're going to look at a brain in EEG, right? And it's like, but what do those two things mean together?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because there's not a lot of good science that has been done that look at those two questions simultaneously, because frankly, it's really hard to put an EEG into an fMRI, because it's hard to put electronics of the EEG system into a MRI machine with a huge big magnet rolling around it. So that's why so many scientists are so excited about the device, because for most, it's the first time to look at these two phenomena simultaneously.
And I sense that from what I read about the press release, like one of the capabilities of this is like not just closed meditation, but really kind of like helping someone to focus with their eyes open and provide the neurofeedback while they do that. And that's a very interesting use case for me. I hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. If you like what you hear, let me know by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and responding with a comment around something that you found interesting in the conversation so far. In addition to these videos, I do a lot of writing on the exploration of consciousness and my own personal revelations in my newsletter called Consciousness, the Doorway to Human Evolution. To receive these updates and more, all you need to do is simply head to the link in the description below and you'll be added to the community of 20,000 plus consciousness explorers receiving weekly ideas and inspiration in their inbox. I look forward to hearing from you there. Now let's get back to the show.
Totally. So with our with our original Muse meditations using EEG, they were always eyes closed experiences. EEG is highly, highly sensitive. So you want to be reducing all of the noise and all of the variables. So moving your eyes around, taking in information visually, all affects your EEG. So our focused attention meditation was always an eyes closed experience so that we're sure that we're doing neurofeedback on your focused attention, not your eye movements or, what's distracting in the landscape, etc. With FNIRS, you can do it eyes open. And we have a beautiful FNIRS neurofeedback experience that is encouraging you to bring new blood flow to your prefrontal cortex. So when you go to the gym and you use your muscles, as you work your muscle, you are asking your body to then demand more oxygen to that muscle. There's more blood flow to that muscle, bringing nutrients to it, allowing it to work longer and more efficiently, and then ultimately have the nutrient load that it needs to build and grow. Um, with our brain, we don't tend to think about oxygen regulation in the brain in real time or vascular regulation in your brain, but it's very important to have sufficient blood flow to the parts of your brain that are working. And indeed, when you bring additional oxygen blood flow to a part of your brain, it can increase its functions and capabilities. So prefrontal cortex FNIRS neurofeedback, I know that's a mouthful, has been demonstrated to improve cognitive function, to improve attention. And what you're really doing is you're strengthening your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain associated with so much of our attention, our inhibition, our decision making, etc.
Do you see, where my mind goes? I remember there was a company like Lumiosity where essentially a lot of people, older people, as they were aging, they did brain training to basically keep themselves sharp. However, there was no scale they could step on for their brain, right? There was no way they could track their weights. And so this seems like it kind of closes the loop with actually providing that type of data alongside those type of activities that someone could perform.
Totally. And what you saw with Lumosity, and this was sort of the big scandal that was generated in the brain training community for a while, what you saw with Lumosity is that people were only getting better at doing the Lumosity game, at doing the reaction time task or, making a train go at the right time through a tunnel, whatever the game was. And they weren't seeing a transfer effect from that game into real life. There is only one task that actually showed a transfer effect, which was essentially the dual end back. It's a memory task. And so, one of the things that's really important as we're doing brain training is to make sure that the brain training that you're doing actually demonstrates a transfer effect. So, a lot of the studies using Muse have been focused on that transfer effect. So, for example, Mayo Clinic has done a ton of studies with Muse, and they have showed that using Muse in cancer care patients, they don't just get better at meditating. It also has improved their quality of life, reduced their stress, improved their fatigue. Mayo Clinic did a big study with their own doctors in the emergency room, and they demonstrated that using Muse decreased burnout by 54%, improved their cognitive function, decreased their stress, et cetera, et cetera. So, the question of what is the transfer effect? Am I just getting better at this game or actually am I improving in my life is really key. And hopefully using devices like Muse actually allows you both to train, to track, and then to engage in the transfer effects.
It's a really good point. It was something I've heard you say in another interview. You were talking about essentially kind of slowing down or even reversing brain regression as people age, and that it's not, you can't just do meditation. You have to do a lot of other things as well. And maybe you could talk about them. But by meditating, you're actually better at complying with all those other things that are supporting you.
Yes. So, some of the very cool research around meditation does demonstrate that when you start a meditation practice, you get better at doing other things in your life. So, you improve your ability to make healthy choices because you become less impulsive. So, if you're somebody who has wanted to make changes in your life around the way that you eat and it just hasn't stuck and you just don't have the motivation, if you're able to actually start a meditation practice, you're more able to withstand your cravings. You're more able to have top down control and will around your decisions and therefore stick to um, food change habits or other habits in your life. So, yeah, meditating alone is not going to save you. But it really does help. And then when we talk about, just since we're on brain health for half a second, this the kind of big steps that you wanna take for your brain health are meditation, sleeping well. It's incredibly important for both your current and long-term brain health, appropriate diet, and lots of exercise. And then the fifth pillar is loving connection and support, which meditation, of course, can also help you engender, particularly if you're doing heart-focused meditations.
Is there any research that you've come across in regards to meditation and sleep that demonstrates you need less sleep as a meditator or as you meditate?
This is an interesting one. Is it just a myth? So, I mean, we've all heard people say, oh, yeah, you need less sleep if you're a meditator. You could just sleep for 4 hours and meditate for the rest of the time. Meditation and sleep are two very different brain states. Um, when we're in sleep, it's critical that we get our deep, deep sleep, which you do not enter. It's like deep delta. You don't enter into that necessarily as you're meditating, particularly not in a standard focused attention meditation practice where what you're trying to do is not get your brain to be sleepy. You're creating a restful state of your brain in which there is clarity as opposed to laxity. So you don't want to be sleepy at all. And in REM sleep, you're actively working through the memories that you have and the emotional experiences that you've had to create new neural connections. So, although I have not seen any research that says, oh, yeah, meditation can take the place of sleep, I personally would not recommend replacing meditation, sleep with meditation, um, even though I'm a huge proponent of meditation because they truly do serve separate functions. Now, for somebody who in their life does not relax a lot and therefore is not a good sleeper to begin with because your body's rushing with cortisol and you're in light sleep for a long period of time before you're dropping into deep sleep because you're not actually progressing through your stages of sleep properly because you are too hyper aroused. Certainly in those cases, um, an hour of rolling around in light sleep, I would recommend an hour of meditation instead, um, because it's going to be doing a significant amount for your body and mind in terms of regulating your heart rate and staying in a lovely alpha state, which also is the beginning stages of sleep. Um, so there could be edge cases in which um, meditation may be a better substitute than poor sleep. And certainly, if you're somebody who wakes up in the middle of the night and rather than staring up at the sky says, hey, I'm going to meditate, also much better use of your time and much less likely that you'll have ruminative thoughts during that time, which will keep you from sleeping. But I wouldn't, suggest swapping out good quality sleep for meditation.
Fair assessment. One question that came up for me is AI. So, I mean, AI, I'm sure you guys have, I know it's built into some of your applications, but do you think this is going to change our capacity to understand the data that we're getting from EEG and other sources and make sense of things that perhaps previously were dismissed?
100%. So, AI definitely has its pitfalls and downfalls, but one thing it's extremely good at is being able to look at massive amounts of data and make sense of it. Not necessarily in a not necessarily because it knows what sense it's wanting to make, but because the patterns in the data pop out, patterns that we can't um, describe or identify using conventional means. So, one example is our sleep staging algorithm. We were able to train a machine learning data set with Muse Sleep EEG, and then it came out with an algorithm that could stage sleep more effectively than an expert. So when you go to a sleep lab, there's a readout, and then you have a sleep technician manually looking at that readout and scoring it, saying, this part is deep sleep. I see sleep spindles here. You're in, N2 sleep. And there's always going to be disagreement between any two technicians and how they score that data. And our automated sleep staging algorithm, built by AI through our machine learning pipeline, is actually more effective than experts at staging that data and identifying markers of sleep. And so now that's something that's actually widely used by research labs for sleep research. So sleep researchers give out muses to participants to study sleep in their own homes, to look at what happens in the brain of somebody with autism while they sleep, with Parkinson's patients, with older adults while they're sleeping. How does cannabis affect sleep? So Muse has multiple studies running with different researchers looking at the impact of cannabis on sleep. And they're able to look at this data in people's own homes using our automated sleep staging algorithm because it's actually better than having somebody come into a traditional sleep lab, which is super cool.
Sounds way more comfortable too. Be in your own bed.
And actually, the same sleep staging algorithm that the researchers use is available to consumers. So anybody who has a Muse S or a Muse S Athena and uses our sleep feature, the graphs that you get at the end are research grade data. And the insights that you're able to derive, like we can show you the depth of your deep sleep. These are all like gold standard EEG sleep lab standard insights, which is amazing.
What does the next frontier of neurofeedback look like? And I guess I would layer in that question. Does it seem like there's any kind of breakthrough technology or innovation on the horizon, on the near horizon, that has the Muse team excited?
Okay, it's a very, very loaded question. So for us, we're excited about so many things. I think the next piece from the consumer side is bringing more of the research tools into the consumer app. So we now have a really effective system where we're able to get ERPs, event-related potentials, which is a characteristic of the brain that is able to analyze how attentive you are at any moment, um, and can be an effective marker for cognitive decline. So, bringing in the tools that we're offering to researchers more and more, bringing them to consumers so that you can use them yourselves to query your own brain. I think the prefrontal cortex neurofeedback is just in its infancy and is going to significantly improve over time. And also, the multimodal neurofeedback with both EEG and FNIRS is also going to open up, massive new frontiers of possibility. When I look at the industry overall from a neurofeedback perspective, electrical stimulation has been, proving to be quite effective at being able to change brain activity over time. I think it's not somewhere that we would go as a company because we're very focused on, not press a button to zap your brain to be better. We're very much focused on tools and technologies that really allow you to understand your brain and allow you to learn the techniques to improve it. Just like in a meditation, what you're doing is not like magically making your mind and life better. You are learning about the process of your own mental state. You're applying tools and techniques to be able to self-regulate more effectively. Um, so I think, we're very much staying in the self-regulation domain where you give people the tools for self-understanding that they can then apply. Um, but certainly, electrical stimulation, magnetic stimulation, when applied properly and like people are not, the consensus is not out on what is proper and, what's effective and what doesn't have long-term side effects. But I would say that that's, the next frontier of neurofeedback.
Is it the ultrasound stuff that's happening with meditation in that category, or is that in a separate category?
That's a separate category. So some of my awesome buddies are um, doing that kind of research. I was about to name them, but then I realized that I think, Jay
We've
Sanguinet.
had Jay on the
Okay,
podcast. Um,
when I met Jay a year ago, he's like, "Shh, don't tell anybody." So I was like, can I tell anyone yet? I've known Jay for years. He's wonderful. So yeah, certainly the work that Jay is doing, and Tim Mullen, and their teams are awesome. Um, it is Ultrasound is yet another category of neurofeedback stim, um, and I trust that group because they're very lab based and very much focused on protocols that are going to be safe and efficacious. So I just get concerned with others in the industry who are not as science focused and come forward with protocols because they're DIY and cool and like research demonstrates they work, but they haven't necessarily explored the edges of cases in which there could be adverse effects.
One of the questions I had for you is, you guys have probably seen some crazy things testing the software on the technology rather on deep meditators, monks, like just people that have really gone for it in their lifetimes. Has there been anything that's been like profound or perplexing, or we've never seen readings like this type of thing before?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, we've had some amazing experiences with people using Muse and jumping from jhana to jhana, and being able to track those. I don't want to misquote because it's not off the top of my head what the EEG differences were like, but certainly, those data are in our database and the database of our collaborators, and are worth going back and analyzing and understanding more deeply.
I think it's really curious. There was a guy that we had on the show who's done Narodasamapati. I don't know if you are familiar with that. It's where it's basically like human hibernation, where the system, his name is Delson Armstrong, completely shuts off, and he basically blacks out and wakes up like 7 days later. And it's a super rare state, and he's been studied by Harvard and a number of other places. And yeah, these just kind of like emergent altered states of consciousness that a lot of people can get into. It just seems like we're at a really exciting time where we can start to try to understand the mechanism. What is the brain actually showing us that these people are doing?
Absolutely, and we're at a really exciting state because you can also explore and understand it yourself. You can actually, in your own home, hooked up to your own smartphone for not very much money, play and experiment yourself and start to understand, your own personal changes and shifts and proclivities.
Now, I know this isn't a core component of the Muse's business or competency, but is anybody using Muse for psychedelic research?
A ton. Yeah, so, there are lots of clinics who, are interested in using Muse both for psychedelics research as well as for psychedelics, intervention, both on the set and settings side. So using meditation to set, and then also on the integration side, using meditation. And then, during ketamine, there's a very characteristic delta signal that, emerges as you get deeper into your ketamine state. So there are a number of groups using Muse to track the EEG during ketamine usage, and to have that be involved in the titration and dosaging process.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, the notion of real-time feedback of what's happening in the brain and dosing, I mean, it's a very interesting thing that could happen with a lot of this stuff. How has your practice evolved over the years? And I'm curious, what does it look like now?
That's a great question. So at the very beginning, I was somebody who was trained in neuroscience. I was a psychotherapist. I was an entrepreneur, been an entrepreneur my whole life and always will be. And I was um, really curious and interested in meditation and unable to do it. I had a real estate business and I had a clothing line and I worked in two research labs hand in hand, like,
You
just
were prolific.
hyper prolific. And the idea of slowing down and making your mind do nothing was terrifying to me, utterly terrifying to me. It's actually funny because now in retrospect, I look back at my old EEGs, and even some of my more recent EEGs, and I can see the hallmarks of an ADD brain. Like it was very, very clear when you look at like a QEEG of my brain, because I took my data from 10, 12, 14 years ago and like ran a QEG, and it's like so obvious that that was an ADD brain. Um, and so meditation was incredibly hard. And it was really through the process of building Muse, kind of 2010, 11, 12, building it into a meditation tool, that 2013, 14, when it finally came out, that I learned to meditate. So I was a non-meditator prior to that, only a meditation wannabe. Um, and then I started using our first basic focused attention meditation. And then I finally got it. Then it was like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. And I joke it was kind of like my first kiss moment. Like I remember when I was probably 14 or 15, I was listening to the radio and there were all these songs about love. And like I just couldn't understand why so many people were singing about love. And then I had my first kiss and I fell in love. Well, I mean, that is a as a very early teenager.
It all clicked.
I listened to the first song in the car. I was in the front seat of the car with my parents, and I listened to the first song on the radio about love, and I was just like, "Oh my god, I get it! Yes, they're singing my language." And so finally, like, the meditation clicking, it was like it felt like that. It was like, "Oh, okay, all of the 2,000 years of wisdom that I've been reading, all these books finally make sense to me. Like, now I get what they're talking about." And so from there, from the basic focused attention practice, it kind of broadened into a range of exploring and tasting different practices, into Reiki, exploring and tasting Reiki and energy practices. Um, and now, like at this very moment, I am back into a more traditional focused attention meditation, kind of feel a little full circle. Um, and as I'm now like really testing the new tools that we're building. So I'm back in the prefrontal cortex neurofeedback piece. Um, and it's been super powerful. So, over the last decade, my practice has also grown as all the tools in Muse have grown. We have hundreds and hundreds of different guided meditations, from Zen practices to inspirational practices, to like MBSR style. So there have been lots of different pathways to go down as we work with different practitioners and different styles to also build this content. So it's been it's been wonderful, and I'm also super excited about the Ion study, um, as like a little mini retreat in multiple different styles, and spending the time focusing for a few weeks on one style, then a second, then the third.
Mm.
Mm,
So you're going to do it.
yes, of course.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. And is there, do you have a sense of the longevity of that study? Because that's another thing that's interesting to me, is like, how do these people's brains change with over a prolonged period of time doing these practices versus just kind of like a couple weeks or whatever it is?
Yeah, so that study was not necessarily designed to look at long-term changes. Um, um, but we have, in our database, the ability to go back and generate those kinds of insights around long-term practices. And we also have a lot of researchers who now take Muse out into the wild for meditation research, and we help them to make sense of that data. So, that we continue to learn more and more. Um, there's also another, Mark McDonough has an app called Go Deeper, where he's also wanting to classify different meditation styles, and the EEG associated with them. So, there's lots of ways to both, do formal science as well as to join as citizen scientists when you have the device. We, commonly send out invitations for different kinds of studies, to help contribute to greater understanding of the mind and how it impacts our life.
Well, it's amazing work that you're doing, and I'm grateful you're doing it. And thank you so much for coming on. This was really fun and fun to hear about where you're heading. And it's just it's just an exciting time to be in the mindfulness consciousness space. Feels like a really exciting time. And I want to give you the opportunity to just share if people are interested in trying Muse or learning more about it. What's the best place they can do that?
Totally. You can go to choosemuse.com, CHOOSEMUSE.com. And there you can find the Muse 2, that is mainly for meditation, and then the Athena device, which helps you both with neurofeedback during meditation, has the FNIRS technology that we talked about, and also tracks your sleep like a sleep lab, and comes with bio and neurofeedback that actually helps you fall asleep. So all of those things can be found at choosemuse.com.
It rhymes. So easy to remember, everyone. And we'll also link it out so that you guys can just make that simple connection. Thank you, Ariel. It was really, really fun to have this conversation, and just super grateful for you.
Thank you. I also want to just circle back for 1 second to the idea of efficiency. Um, because earlier on in the conversation, we were talking about sort of like using Muse and how it helps. And twice I used the idea of efficiency. And as the words were coming out of my mouth, I was like, okay, that's interesting. Why did we choose this word at this moment? Because a lot of the conversation around using technology for conscious enhancing tools, for conscious enhancing practices is like, okay, well, what is the role of technology? What are the goals? Is this supposed to be a goal directed practice, or is it not goal directed? And sometimes as humans we fall into the trap of what is efficient. And so in that moment the human trap of efficiency seemed to be an important thing to comment on, but is not necessarily the guiding principle or the guiding goal. So just, yeah, lots of different. We could go on for a really long time geeking out about the different ways to think about these practices and how they interact with our human experience.
So, I mean, just to zoom in on that a little bit, I mean, I could see both. I see the both sides of it, right? I mean, it ultimately Muse is providing awareness of how something, how you're doing at something and how you might be better. But it does seem like there is a ceiling with practice when it's used as a mean to an end, when you're constantly, I need to get better, I need to get better, I need to get better, and kind of in that efficiency orientation. Yeah. How do you think about it?
Okay, so anybody who's a muser will know about the birds, and people often talk about like, oh my god, I got 12 birds or 27 birds, and they're super proud about how many birds they got, which is great. So a bird is what happens when you are able to maintain focused attention on your breath for 5 seconds or more. You hear the little tweeting of the bird, and the bird is also a mechanism to teach about the ephemeral nature, to really start to do a little bit of non-dual work. So when you're meditating with Muse, when your mind wanders, you hear the sound pick up, it becomes a cue to bring your attention back to your breath. Lots of people become very frustrated by the sound getting louder. And of course, if you're frustrated by it, it's just going to get louder and louder. And so you really have to learn to like let go of the goal directed nature of this. I'm not trying to make the sound go away. I'm just going to be, and that goes away. And the birds are the same way. So when you focus on your breath and then you get a bird the first time, you're like, okay, that was a sound, whatever. When you know that the bird is a reward, and it starts to tweet, then you're like, oh my God, I got a bird. I'm so good at this. And then the bird flies away. And so it becomes this amazing way to sort of undermine the potentially goal-directed nature of like gamified meditation. And so you have to be just as equally uninvested in your rewards as you are in your failures. You have to exist, or you have the opportunity to exist in a state of non-striving, in order to allow the birds to emerge. So yeah, that kind of deals with that question of the plateau, or the question of the competitive goal-oriented nature of it.
Very cool. I did not know that about the design of the system. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into that.
Yeah, it's fun. We've had a lot of fun being able to think about ways to allow us to think about our own selves.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited for the future of Muse and everything that your team is doing. And thanks again, Ariel. This was really, really fun.
Oh, my joy and pleasure. Totally fun. Really fun to jam with you.